The Lord of the Rings trilogy for me is the best trilogy that has ever come out. There's lots of great trilogies, and I'm sure there's a lot that you could think could compete with that, and you're welcome to put them in the comments. But I personally feel like there's no other franchise or trilogy that I've returned to as much as I have with The Lord of the Rings. I think I've watched it every single year, at least, since it came out. So I've seen it over 20 times each. I remember the day my mother came home and I was a sweet little 9-year-old boy. And my mom came home and she's like, I've seen this amazing movie. It's called Lord of the Rings. You have to watch it. Da, 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 da. My mom's pretty awesome. And we ended up going through and watching it, I think, that day or the next morning. And I remember sitting in that movie and being blown away. And when Galadriel pops up and she declares that she's a queen and terrifying and all that, that traumatized me. It was crazy. But I still remember just being so blown away by how epic it was and loving those movies so much. They hold up today masterfully because of their practical nature. And Peter Jackson did a great job. He did a fantastic job with those films. We have the announcement that has come out that they are now creating more Lord of the Rings movies, which is going to be called The Hunt for Gollum. Obviously focusing on Gollum and his character. Andy Serkis is returning as his character of Gollum, but also going to be directing, which is a massive opportunity for him. He's done a few things. He's directed a few things like the latest Venom and Carnage film, which wasn't bad, but I think he has a real opportunity now to show his directing chops, because there's no doubt he's a great actor. He's amazing. But it's a really exciting opportunity for him. But the real question for us as fans of Lord of the Rings is, should we allow ourselves to be excited? And there's no doubt that we want to see amazing things, but we've kind of been burnt a little bit in the past. So should we be allowing ourselves to be excited? And this is kind of what I want to discuss. There's a few things I think that, for me, lean to worry, which I will discuss. And then there's a few things that I feel lean to real excitement around the project. So here's what I wanted to discuss about the things that I'm potentially worried about. The first thing is, we've had The Lord of the Rings come out, which was 2001, 2002, and 2003. Amazing. Then came the Hobbit Trilogy, which was, if anything, a step down. I wouldn't say that they're terrible movies. I don't think that at all. But when you've got The Lord of the Rings, which set the highest bar, and then you've got to follow that up with a book that is a lot smaller and you're trying to extrapolate a lot more out of that, The Hobbit just ended up being something that was good, but I have never returned to them. I've never had a desire to return to them. I saw them, they were good, but they weren't great. And a lot of people had their gripes with it. I mean, the use of CGI was a bit much. The lack of the practical effects and practical costumes, I think, was felt. And you wonder if they have paid attention to what the fans have said. I'm sure they've heard that, and I'm sure they're aware of that. And we'll discuss Peter Jackson's involvement a little bit later, because I think the whole thing around The Hobbit was interesting. There's a lot of interesting aspects around The Hobbit that I think I want to discuss. The other aspect, of course, that they brought The Hobbit, and then they brought out the Rings of Power. Again, the Rings of Power, for me, I think a lot of people wanted to hate it, which tends to be the way of fans these days, is finding a way to hate the things before they even come out and then projecting that on everyone else to make it feel like they're not going to do well and all those kinds of things. And what we got was, I think, something that was really entertaining. But I realized as I was watching it that this was just a really large budget for a fan fiction, in a way. That's kind of like how I looked at it. And when I realized that, I really could enjoy it for what it was. And I'm excited to see the second season. It's got a lot of exciting, cool things, a lot of practical effects, interesting story, interesting characters. There's a few parts where you're like, I hope they improve on this, but it's a good, solid start to something that they're surely planning a few seasons for. So there's that. But again, I would never go back and watch the first season of The Rings of Power because it didn't have that draw for me the way that the Lord of the Rings do, the rewatchability. And this kind of leads me to kind of talking about the second wave of worry I have, which is in the back of my mind, there's this thing that seems to happen where you get the initial thing, which is like, for example, the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the original Star Wars trilogy or the Harry Potter movies. They have the initial storyline that they do that is epic and blows everyone away, and then it's almost like the pressure's on, or that they try to replicate or try to do something different, or it's just like something doesn't work, but they never quite capture that feel of those first initial films. I think about Harry Potter, for example, which I love. Again, very similar. I would still put Lord of the Rings above Harry Potter, but it's got a different feel and different vibe. But such an epic series of movies. Then you got Fantastic Beasts, which I enjoyed watching it, but have had zero desire to go back to at all. The worry is that we may never get anything close to what we got with those initial films. That's a worry. I'm not saying that will happen, but it's a worry. So that's my worries. In a nutshell, that's what it is. Now, I want to talk about the things that I get excited about. The first thing is, it's the same writers as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I know it's Peter Jackson's wife, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens. They are the writers of the original trilogy, and they are coming in to do this film. So there you've got a massive checkbox. I think people underestimate how amazing and important that is, because this kind of leads into going back to Peter Jackson and The Hobbit. That originally wasn't going to be directed by Peter Jackson, and you might be aware of this, but if you're not, the history of it was that Guillermo del Toro was going to be directing the Hobbit films, which were originally just going to be 2 of them instead of a trilogy. And he was really deep into the production, the landscape, everything. And then MGM Studios was having a whole financial thing going on, which put this kind of on a limbo. He decided to leave the project, which broke his heart. I mean, he's spoken about it, and it was hard for him to do. He was devastated by that. And then a few months later, it all resolved, and then Peter Jackson came on to kind of pick up the pieces. So when you look at the writers of the of the Hobbit trilogy, you've got Del Toro's name in there. Peter Jackson had to kind of come in, and it wasn't fully his vision. It was kind of coming in and saying, well, what can we do with what we've got? He didn't have as much time to prepare as he had with Lord of the Rings. And that all, I'm not saying is an excuse, but it's definitely a challenge they had to take on that might have affected the quality or potentially the vision, because I would have much preferred either to have Del Toro's full vision or Peter Jackson's full vision rather than halfway through, right? And that's the nature of life. These things happen, but it does mean that we can kind of give Peter Jackson a little pass on The Hobbit and say, well, okay, I forgive you, man. I recognize that was a hard situation, that you had a rough go, but we're going into a new movie. You've got your wife and the same writing partner taking this on again. You've got time to prepare. You've had time to think about this, and now you can go into this properly. Because Peter Jackson, as they say, although he's not directing, the article kind of mentions that Peter Jackson and his partners Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens are producing the movie and will be involved every step of the way. That is, for me, a comforting, reassuring thing, especially in the context of what we've just discussed with The Hobbit and that kind of fragmented thing he came into. So that, for me, is a little bit of a lighter weight, thinking, okay, Peter Jackson's got full reign. I hope that he's listened to the audience saying, like, please, man, the CGI was, like, of course, Gollum being CGI, understandable. He is his character and he has to be that way. But the orcs, the landscape, everything that involved, we want that back. Please bring that back. And I think hopefully he does that. Right, let's get on to Andy Serkis. Venom and Carnage wasn't something that was a smash hit that you would describe as something that was, Oscar winning or in any capacity going to be something that's going to be extremely memorable. But it was a good job. He's directed other things, which I've heard, I think a movie called Breathe, which I understand was actually very good. I haven't seen it yet. But what I do have confidence in is that Andy Serkis is a Lord of the Rings fanatic. If you haven't listened to the audiobooks that he's narrated, if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings in any way and you have not listened to those audiobooks, 100% stop what you're doing. Go find them. Sign up for a free trial or whatever it is that you do to listen to it. Make another account. Sign up for another free trial so you can listen to the second one. Whatever you need to do, listen to those audiobooks, because I literally had moments where I was driving in the car listening to this and just crying because of the power of the way he narrates and the amazing voice acting he does. It's just so good. So give that a listen to. And he is just an amazing Lord of the Rings fan. So there's no doubt that he wants to make this good. And he wants to make it good like the Lord of the Rings was. Another thing to get excited by. There's a YouTube channel called The Nerd of the Rings. No doubt you've heard of it. If you love Lord of the Rings, you would have come across this. And I had a chance to listen to and watch his video talking about this announcement and covering this topic. And he put forward, and I'll put a link in the description just to kind of for your interest there. But he put out his suggestion on what this story might entail. And there is a storyline from the books which follows Gandalf, who enlists Aragorn to go out and find Gollum when he starts suspecting that Gollum might have possession of this ring, which might be the One Ring, and how it connects to Sauron and all this kind of stuff, which is very exciting because it brings to mind the potential of who might be joining this cast. Now, Aragorn as a character, I think, would be epic to see again. I don't know how they could get Viggo Mortensen to do this, because not that I don't think he'd have the desire, but I think he's in his 60s now. So maybe he will, and if they can, that would be great. But I think they might look at recasting if that's the case, or doing something along those lines, or maybe like a de-aging thing. I don't know what they're going to do there, but we do know potentially that he might be coming back. We might see characters like Gandalf coming back, Bilbo, and we might see Galadriel. I feel like Aragorn was the face of the Lord of the Rings with Frodo. Frodo, what I doubt will be in this. Maybe he will, but to have Aragorn be in this, I think would be really exciting. Going on this kind of adventure could be really fun to see. The last part of this that I think is worth noting is that when The Hobbit came out, obviously everyone was excited. It didn't end up being what I think most of the fans were wanting. But that didn't change at all how I felt about Lord of the Rings. When the Rings of Power came out, people were talking about, oh, this whatever, feminist, terrible garbage. It's going to be just a shame on the Lord of the Rings name and whatever. Look, if you loved it or you hated it, it didn't really change how I felt about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, what have you got to lose by taking a good shot at making something else in the Lord of the Rings realm? Because worst case scenario, it sucks. It doesn't come anything close to what we were hoping it would be. It's another kind of failed run at a franchise that they're trying to really make as much money out of as possible. And, well, to get over my woes and my worries and stresses about it, I'll just go back and watch the trilogy. But best case scenario is Andy Serkis and the Lord of the Rings writing team pull out this magical, amazing movie that transports us back to the Middle Earth in the way that we've loved. And we see these characters we love interacting again, and we discover potentially new characters that we hadn't had an opportunity to explore in the books. And we have an amazing film. That is something to look forward to and get excited about, because if that's the potential, which they've lined up all the right cues there to make it a reality, if that's the potential, then I think we have the right and the freedom to get excited. Some of us might feel afraid to. I've seen it before. People are like, it's going to be trash. That's just people comforting themselves because they don't want to be disappointed. That's really what it is. So I'm going into this optimistic and looking forward to what they can produce, what they can bring out of this, and hoping that Andy Serkis does a great job, because if he can direct in the way I hope he can, then it's going to set him up for a wonderful directing career. But look, that's my thoughts. I think lots to be excited about there. What do you guys think? Do you feel, based on what I've said, that you can feel the freedom to be excited? Or are you still being weighed down by the darkness that the Ring has placed upon us post Lord of the Rings trilogy? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic, wonderful, happy day.